The rain fell softly over the quiet streets of Westbury, a quaint town nestled between the Wiltshire hills. Amelia Hawthorne stood by the window of her modest flat, fingers curled around a chipped mug of chamomile tea, her eyes fixed on the distant church tower where she was supposed to be married in less than a week. Everything was supposed to be perfect. After 10 years with Thomas, her university sweetheart turned dependable fiancé, Amelia believed she had finally arrived at the calm after life's many storms. Yet something felt wrong. Lately, Thomas had grown distant. The warmth in his voice, the tenderness in his touch, both had faded into routine politeness. At first, Amelia blamed the stress of the wedding. But deep down, a quiet voice whispered doubts that gnawed at her peace. Her younger sister, Eliza, had moved in a month ago under the pretext of helping with the final preparations. Eliza, the golden one, the one with the smile that could light up any room and a charm that drew people in like moths to a flame. Where Amelia was quiet and thoughtful, Eliza was loud and unapologetically bold. Their bond had been tested before, but never like this. Amelia, Eliza called from the living room, "You've got a letter." Amelia turned, startled. Letters were rare these days. She opened the envelope and froze. It was a photo of Thomas with Eliza at a hotel in Bath, his hand resting on the small of Eliza's back, her head on his shoulder, both smiling intimately. The mug slipped from Amelia's grasp and shattered against the tiled floor. Her heart did not shatter, it cracked. Silently. Almost invisibly. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she picked up the pieces of the broken mug, her hands trembling only slightly. She looked at Eliza, who was watching her carefully, almost expectantly, from across the room. "Is this your idea of a joke?" Amelia asked, her voice eerily calm. Eliza tilted her head, feigning innocence. "What do you mean?" But in her eyes, Amelia saw it, the flicker of guilt. That was the moment something inside Amelia changed. The woman who had planned floral arrangements and napkin colors vanished. In her place stood someone colder. Sharper. Ready. She wouldn't cancel the wedding. No. She would attend it. But on her own terms. And before the church bells could ring, secrets would be dragged into the light. The sun rose timidly over Westbury the next morning, casting a golden haze through Amelia's lace curtains. She hadn't slept. Not truly. Her mind kept replaying the image, the photo of Eliza and Thomas, so casual in their betrayal it was almost theatrical. She stared at her wedding dress, still hanging pristine in the corner of her bedroom. White satin. Handmade lace. Long sleeves, just the way she liked it. It was a symbol of everything she had once believed in. Now, it felt like a costume. She walked into the living room to find Eliza scrolling through her phone, legs draped lazily over the sofa, a bowl of cereal forgotten on the coffee table. "Eliza," Amelia said evenly. "Did you try on my dress yesterday?" Eliza's eyes didn't lift from her phone. "I was just curious." "You wore it." Eliza shrugged, the corners of her mouth twitching. "It looked better on me." That single sentence clung to the walls like a curse. Amelia said nothing. She just turned and walked to the small storage cupboard beside the kitchen. From it, she retrieved an old photo album, one Eliza had thought long gone. Dusty and frayed, it contained the kind of memories that could crack foundations. Later that day, while Eliza was out, Amelia visited Clarice, the dressmaker. A kind old woman with steady hands and a sharp mind. "You're not here for a fitting, are you?" Clarice asked. Amelia smiled faintly. "I need something dramatic. Quiet, but loud in its meaning." Clarice raised a knowing brow. "Ah. So it's that kind of wedding." Amelia handed her a sketch, an altered version of the original gown. Sleeker. Colder. No veil. Just presence. Clarice took the drawing and nodded. It'll be done. By the time Amelia returned home, the house was silent. Eliza was back in her room, probably posting filtered photos on social media, all smiles and fake captions. But something had shifted. Amelia didn't feel like the forgotten sister anymore. She sat at her desk and opened her laptop. One by one, she began saving screenshots, dated messages, and call logs. Every breadcrumb Thomas had left behind. She wasn't planning revenge. She was preparing for justice. The following morning, Amelia woke up early and visited the church alone. She needed to see it one last time, unspoiled. The pews were empty, but her imagination was loud. She could see herself standing at the altar. She could see Thomas. And now, she could see Eliza too. Only Eliza wasn't seated with the guests. She was walking down the aisle. In Amelia's dress. Suddenly, the memory became too much. Amelia turned and walked out. As she stepped into the crisp morning air, her phone buzzed. One message. From a private number. They're planning something for the rehearsal dinner. You need to be ready. Her fingers trembled as she read the words again. The game had begun. The night of the rehearsal dinner arrived like a storm in disguise, calm on the surface, but trembling with thunder beneath. Held at the Wren's Hollow, a rustic country inn nestled just outside Westbury, it was the kind of place people chose for its charm. Wooden beams, candlelight, laughter echoing against brick walls. But for Amelia, it was a stage. Eliza had gone all out. Her makeup was sharp, her dress red and too tight for a family gathering. She looked like she had already claimed the bride's crown. Thomas didn't seem bothered. He greeted everyone with the same dimpled grin Amelia had once fallen for, as if he weren't about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Amelia entered last. She wore a navy silk gown, simple, elegant, untouched by trend. Her hair was pinned high, lips bare. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Every step she took felt deliberate. Every eye in the room turned to her. Even the candles seemed to burn quieter. Amelia, Thomas said, stepping forward with an uncertain warmth. You look different. She tilted her head. Do I? Before he could answer, Eliza appeared beside him, clutching his arm like a trophy. Don't we look perfect together? She asked the room with that sugary confidence only she could weaponize. Amelia raised her glass. Absolutely. A perfect pair of pretenders. There was a beat of silence. The dinner moved on awkwardly, conversations dipping into nervous laughter and too much wine. Amelia barely touched her food. She was watching. Listening. And waiting. At the end of the evening, the Reverend called for everyone's attention. I'd like to offer a blessing for the couple, he said. Let's gather around. Eliza beamed as she stepped forward, pulling Thomas along. Everyone circled. Amelia stayed just outside the ring. Her eyes never left them. The Reverend began his speech, warm and well-rehearsed, until halfway through, he paused. Before I continue, it's been brought to my attention that there's a complication. Eliza froze. Apparently, he continued, clearing his throat, there are questions about the authenticity of this union. I've been asked to halt the blessing until it's clarified who the bride actually is. Murmurs exploded across the room. Eliza's face drained of color. What is this? She hissed, turning to Thomas. But he wasn't looking at her. He was staring at Amelia, who now stepped forward slowly, her phone in hand. I suppose now is as good a time as any, she said. She tapped the screen, and the projector on the wall behind them flickered to life. First slide. A photo of Thomas kissing Eliza, time-stamped months before the engagement. Second slide. Messages. Dozens. Some romantic. Some cruel. Third slide. A private booking receipt. Eliza had secretly reserved the Wren's Hollow under her name and listed herself as the bride. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Eliza, Amelia said calmly, you may have stolen my dress, my venue, and my fiancé, but you forgot something. Eliza's lips barely moved. What? My silence. The screen went black. Eliza ran. Thomas stood frozen. The Reverend quietly stepped aside. Amelia turned and walked out, her heels clicking against the stone floor like punctuation. She didn't look back. But she wasn't done. Not yet. The morning of what should have been the happiest day of Amelia's life arrived with skies of soft grey and a wind that whispered of change. The village of Westbury was unusually quiet, as if even the air held its breath, unsure of what would unfold. At the church, St. Michael's, preparations were still underway. Flowers were arranged, the organist rehearsed quietly, and the pews filled with confused guests clutching crumpled invitations. They had come expecting vows and veils, what they got instead was tension thick enough to cut with a blade. Eliza hadn't been seen since the rehearsal dinner. Rumors swirled. Some said she'd fled to London. Others claimed she was locked in her room at Rosebank House, refusing to speak to anyone. Thomas, meanwhile, arrived alone. He looked like a man who had misplaced his life. His hair was disheveled, tie crooked, and for once, he wasn't smiling. He sat in the front pew, staring blankly at the altar. Every so often, he would check the entrance. But Amelia didn't come. Until she did. Exactly at 11, the heavy oak doors creaked open, and Amelia stepped into the aisle. Not in white. Not in sorrow. But in a charcoal grey suit, sharp and bold, like a declaration. Her heels echoed with purpose as she walked straight to the front, not to join Thomas, but to stand before the guests. Gasps rippled through the church. She faced the crowd, her voice steady, low but clear. Thank you for coming, she began, though I imagine you're wondering why you're here. She took a breath. There will be no wedding today. Not between me and Thomas. Not between Thomas and Eliza. Because truth, as inconvenient as it is, refuses to be hidden forever. Whispers rose, but she silenced them with a glance. I trusted the wrong people, she continued. I gave 10 years of loyalty, love, and silence. And in return, I was betrayed in the most public, personal way imaginable. Thomas rose, his mouth opening to speak, but Amelia lifted her hand. No, Thomas. This is the first time I speak without interruption. You don't get to explain. Not anymore. She turned back to the guests. I was meant to wear a dress today. I was meant to promise forever. But instead, I chose something else. I chose to walk away. Not out of shame, but strength. Because the real vow I'm making is to myself. Then she turned and walked out, head high, spine straight, past the stunned faces and floral arches, past the bell tower that stayed silent. Outside, the village square had gathered a crowd. Some held phones, others just watched. Amelia didn't slow. Behind her, the doors remained open, revealing a church full of questions, and a groom without a bride. As she reached the edge of the square, an unexpected figure stepped forward. Her father. He looked older than she remembered. His eyes tired, but proud. I should have believed you sooner, he said. Amelia looked at him for a long moment before replying. You still can. And with that, she walked away, not into exile, but into something else entirely. Freedom. But in the shadows of Westbury, not everyone was done with the drama. Especially not Eliza. Because betrayal, when exposed, rarely stays quiet. The silence in Rosebank House was almost haunting. After the failed wedding, the grand estate stood still, its ivy-covered walls guarding whispers that had long remained buried. No more guests. No more celebrations. Just the echo of betrayal clinging to every corridor. Eliza hadn't stepped outside in days. She remained in her room, curtains drawn tight, ignoring the knocks from her mother, from the housekeeper, even from Thomas, who had tried, only once, to plead his case through the door. But it wasn't guilt that kept Eliza hidden. It was fear. Because there was more than just a stolen fiancé and a borrowed wedding dress. There was a secret. A darker one. One that, if exposed, could ruin her far beyond village gossip. It all began 2 summers ago, on a night no one but her remembered clearly. That evening, after one of Westbury's charity galas, Eliza had stumbled into the wine cellar in search of quiet. There, she'd found someone else. Someone unexpected. Arthur Blythe. The husband of her closest friend, Cassandra. And he hadn't come for wine. They had spoken. Whispered. Confessed. And eventually, crossed a line that should never have been touched. What started as a single lapse spiraled into a hidden affair. They met in secret places, behind the stables, in his car outside the estate, and once, recklessly, in the guest house during a family gathering. It was foolish. Dangerous. Addictive. Until Cassandra found out. She had confronted Eliza one evening in the conservatory. Tears, accusations, and a promise. That if Eliza didn't end it, she would tell everyone. Eliza had agreed. Lied. Then threatened Cassandra in return, warning her of the consequences should the truth ever emerge. And then, the very next week, Cassandra vanished. Everyone believed she had taken off to Scotland to care for a distant aunt. There was a letter, neatly folded and posted. But Amelia had always found it strange. Cassandra left her cat, her jewelry, her passport. Now, alone in her room, Eliza reread that letter again and again. She hadn't written it, but she knew who had. Arthur. To cover their tracks. To make the problem go away. And now, with Amelia gone from the house and the village in uproar, Eliza began to feel it, the walls closing in. That evening, just as the sun dipped behind the hills, Eliza crept down to the cellar again. She needed to be sure. To check the lock on the old wine chamber that hadn't been used in years. She descended the stone steps slowly, her breath catching at every creak. The scent of damp and dust filled her nose. And there, beneath the faded tapestry, she uncovered it. A door. Padlocked. Still shut. Still hidden. But for how long? Because someone else had begun asking questions. Amelia. From the safety of a cottage on the edge of town, Amelia had started digging. Not just into her own heartbreak, but into all the fractures in the lives of those she once trusted. Starting with Eliza. And the cellar would soon be the first place she searched. The morning fog rolled in thick over Westbury, curling through the hedgerows like ghosts returning to unfinished stories. Amelia stood by the window of her rented cottage, a letter clutched in her trembling hands. She had found it inside her late father's old writing desk, wedged behind a drawer she hadn't touched in years. It wasn't addressed to her. It was meant for Eliza. Dated 3 months ago, penned in Arthur Blythe's recognizable hand. She read it again, slowly, every syllable searing her with disbelief. Arthur had written to Eliza, not just about love, but about what they had done. His words hinted at the guilt clawing at him, at his desperation to leave the village, to start over somewhere far away. But what chilled Amelia most were the final lines. If she ever returns, if she speaks, it all crumbles. We swore silence, Eliza. You promised. Amelia folded the letter, her mind racing. She had suspected betrayal. Suspected infidelity. But this was something darker. A shared crime. A pact to bury the past, literally or not, she still wasn't sure. And if Cassandra had never left willingly, she needed to act. That afternoon, under the cloak of the low-hanging fog, Amelia walked to Rosebank House. She didn't ring the bell. She knew Eliza wouldn't answer. Instead, she circled to the side of the estate, slipping through the rose garden until she reached the cellar doors. Locked. But not impenetrable. Amelia fished a pin from her coat. She wasn't exactly trained in lockpicking, but desperation lent her hands a surprising steadiness. After a few tries, the padlock clicked open. The scent of earth and mold hit her like a wave. She stepped inside. Each creaking step deeper into the stone chamber pulled her breath tighter. The cellar stretched long, with old wine racks lining the walls and crates of dust-covered bottles stacked high. But at the far end, behind a torn curtain of cobwebs, was another door. Wooden. Stained. With fresh scratches on the handle. Her fingers hesitated. Then she pushed. It groaned open to reveal a small, dark chamber. Cold and silent. Nothing at first. Then, her eyes adjusted. A shoe. One high heel, elegant and familiar. Amelia stumbled back, heart slamming in her chest. She clutched the wall, her breath quickening as dread washed over her. There was more in that room. Something under the dusty tarpaulin, just barely visible beneath old sacks of coal. She didn't have the strength to lift it alone. She ran. Back into the grey daylight, lungs burning, mud on her boots. Straight to the one person she swore she'd never speak to again. Arthur. He was at the village hall, attending some committee on land development, wearing that calm, rehearsed smile. Until he saw her. Until she showed him the letter. His expression changed. He didn't ask how she found it. He didn't try to lie. He just whispered one word. Please. But Amelia didn't stop. I need to know, she said through clenched teeth. Is she? Arthur shook his head. You don't want to open that door, Amelia. Her voice trembled. I already did. Rain began to fall as Amelia and Arthur stood at the edge of the rose garden. It came down softly at first, then heavier, soaking through her coat and matting Arthur's neatly combed hair. He wasn't the charming, polished man of the village now. He looked haunted. Tired. Like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. I never meant for it to go that far, he said. Amelia didn't answer. She led him silently to the cellar. Together, they descended the stairs. The air was thicker now, heavier. The cold had a bite. Every sound was amplified, the drip of water from the ceiling, the crunch of gravel under their shoes, the echo of their breath. When they reached the door at the end of the chamber, Amelia stepped back. You open it, she said. Arthur hesitated, then placed his hand on the wooden handle. It groaned again, reluctantly swinging open. Inside, the shadows seemed to pull inward, reluctant to reveal the truth. Arthur stepped in. He moved the sack slowly, his hands shaking. Underneath the tarpaulin was a wooden chest. A coffin. No ornaments. No plaque. Just a single, deep scratch along its side, like something had tried to escape. Amelia covered her mouth, her eyes wide. Arthur fell to his knees. She wasn't supposed to die, he whispered. It was an accident. A stupid, drunken argument. She slipped. Hit her head. Amelia looked down at him. And instead of calling the police, she was going to destroy Eliza. Cassandra had evidence. About the money, the fund transfers. Eliza had been siphoning from the family trust for years. If that came out, the entire estate would have collapsed. Her reputation, her standing, all gone. Amelia knelt beside the chest, brushing the dust off gently. So you buried her. Together. I couldn't lose everything, Arthur said. We told ourselves we'd move her later. Give her a proper place. But Eliza, she changed. Grew cold. Like she wanted to forget it ever happened. A beat passed between them. Then Amelia stood. She deserves more than this. Arthur nodded, slowly rising. Let me help you. But as they began to lift the heavy chest, a sound from above made them freeze. The slam of the cellar door. Footsteps. Fast. Sharp. Coming down. And then, Eliza. She stood at the foot of the stairs, soaked from the rain, mascara running down her cheeks, a long blade of garden shears in her hands. Her eyes locked onto the chest. Then Amelia. Then Arthur. I told you, she hissed, never to open that door. Eliza stood motionless at the bottom of the stairs. Her soaked trench coat clung to her body, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The garden shears in her hands caught the light from the cellar bulb, gleaming like a warning. You think you can just dig up the past and walk away, she hissed. Amelia slowly stepped in front of Arthur, her body a barrier. It's over, Eliza. We found her. The truth is out. Eliza laughed. It was bitter, broken. The truth. The truth died with Cassandra. She took a step forward. Arthur raised his hands. Eliza, stop. We can fix this. We go to the police. We tell them everything. Maybe. No, her voice cracked like thunder. We don't get to choose now, Arthur. You had your chance when you swore loyalty to me. When you said you'd protect me. I was protecting all of us, he shouted. Amelia didn't flinch. Her eyes locked on Eliza. You were never protecting anyone but yourself. Eliza's eyes flicked between them. Rage bloomed across her face. She lunged. Arthur moved first. The cellar became a flurry of movement. Arthur wrestled the shears from Eliza's grasp, the two struggling as the metal clanged against the stone floor. Amelia backed against the wall, heart pounding. Eliza fought like a woman cornered. Desperate. Screaming. Then, in a final twist of bodies, Arthur stumbled, the shears slipping from both their hands. They clattered to the ground. Eliza froze. Her breath rasped. Amelia grabbed the handle of the chest, dragging it away, out of the line of chaos. Arthur grabbed Eliza's wrists. Stop this. It's done. It's over. But Eliza looked past him. Her eyes were locked on the chest. She broke free and bolted toward it. But Amelia was faster. She stood in front of it, arms wide. Eliza paused, just for a second. Just enough time for the sound of sirens to reach them. From above, flashing blue light painted the cellar walls. Tires screeched on gravel. The police were here. Eliza turned to Arthur with one final, seething glare. You betrayed me, she whispered. Arthur collapsed to the floor. The cellar door opened wide as officers stormed in, shouting orders. They pulled Eliza away. She didn't resist. Arthur sat against the wall, eyes vacant. And Amelia. She stood silently, staring at the coffin of the woman whose voice had been silenced for too long. Later, the officers would remove the body with care. Forensics would comb every inch of the cellar. And Arthur would confess to everything. The trial made headlines for weeks. But none of that mattered to Amelia. What mattered was that Cassandra had a name again. A grave. And Eliza. The rose who had thrived in darkness, twisting and curling with poison, had finally wilted.